Hi guys, my name is Michael Cheng. Today I'll be talking about how to master any programming language. Just a bit of background, that's me. You can find me on Twitter, on GitHub, and my blog site. Take a quick picture of this and you can move on. Okay? So a little bit about me. I'm a self-learned front-end, back-end iOS developer. I've been building websites since 2001. I started the PHP user group back in 2006 in Singapore. I also co-founded iOS DevScout, which is a developer group for iOS developers in Singapore. And I worked in a couple of startups. One is Found, back in 2010, and Big33, now called BigMe, back in 2012. Recently joined about a year ago, almost a year ago. I joined a company called New Innovation. So basically we're agile shop. We do Ruby on Rails and stuff. So back in the I started out as a PHP developer back in 2001 rather. And I've been working on various types of websites. Stuff I built on my own using PHP, stuff on WordPress, on Drupal and whatnot. So I started as a web designer, but I kind of picked up programming as I went along because I found I have a natural curiosity of asking questions about how things work. Right. So the first language I actually learned was actually ColdFusion. Have anyone here used ColdFusion before? CFML, right? Text for the win. So anyway, that was the first language I ever learned. Just for building websites, because I was working with a bunch of developers who were using that straight out of Singapore Temasek Polytechnic, which is a local polytechnic. And they're all girls. 3 girls teaching me how to code in CFML, which is kind of interesting. No, nothing wrong with that. I think it's great, and we need more of them. Indeed they are, because they are very patient. They are very patient. So anyway, so I started as a PHP developer, CFML developer, and then I went to PHP, and then from there I went on to learn JavaScript and all the other stuff, and Objective-C. It's quite an interesting jump because I joined a company where the mobile developer was leaving the company. So it was like the CEO looked at me and said, "Hey, you can do mobile, right?" "No." "You can learn, right?" "Yes." "Let's do this." So I picked up iOS development using Objective-C, native only, if anyone's asking. Since last year, I've been doing Ruby on Rails professionally for the last 1 year. So I guess I come with a fair bit of experience in learning, in switching from language to language. So I want to share with you a little bit about my experiences in doing so. So the first thing I need to know when I come to any programming language, like recently I've been learning a bit about Go. Anyone use Go? Golang? Yeah? Cool. So first thing I want to ask myself, how do I print stuff on screen? The fundamental Hello World app, right? How do you get stuff printed on screen? So on PHP, you just do echo something or print something. In Ruby, it's pretty much the same thing, like puts something, right? And it ends up on the screen, right? So that's the first thing you learn, how to get stuff printed on screen. Second thing you do is to learn about data types. What are the different types? How do you represent information in that programming language? Like string, numbers, floats, right? So you ask yourself those kind of questions. How do I represent a string? How do I represent a number? So usually the string will be a single quote or double quote around that piece of word or something you're writing. Actually, wait, just show of hands. How many of you are actually developers here? Okay. How many of you are non-developers here? Okay. So I suspect this is kind of your shared experience as well. If I'm speaking to noobish level or something, please kick me in the ass, right? So yeah. So how do you represent floats? How do you represent date time? In my current job, we have a big hoo-ha about date time and date and time zones and shit. This is in Ruby. It's pretty much solved, but it's a bit of a nightmare because our client doesn't want data to be stored in GNT time, it will be stored in SGT, which is kind of a crazy bit. Anyway, number 3. So you learn about how to output stuff on screen. You learn about how to represent data of different types like strings, integers, floats, and stuff like that. Third is how do you pass information around, right? So basically, how do you pass information? We read the same script from one script to another script, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how you pass data around and when to use which one. It's like variables. When you use variables, when you use constants, constants are immutable, unchangeable, usually. Variables are mutable, can be changed. Arrays, hashes, and variable scopes. Variable scopes being the visibility scope. See, can I actually use that variable in this function or in this file or something like that? Has it been declared or instantiated? Stuff like that. So how do you pass stuff around? So in the PHP script, you have things like a super global array, which is the $_get or $_post, which represents what you send in a form post or what you send in a URL. So that's pretty much how you pass data between one file to another file. In the Ruby on Rails app, there will be params attribute, which you can then get stuff from the form post or whatnot, right? So that's one of the ways you can pass data around. Also, number 4, how do you add artificial intelligence? So stuff like if else, we call it control structures. How do you control the flow of the code, right? So code usually reads from top to bottom, right? Sequentially. So but how do you break the flow such that you will skip certain parts of the code? So that's one thing that you need to learn. In any programming languages, I think you should have this. You should have. Yeah. So there's control structures, flow control, if-else statements, switch cases, and stuff like that. So learn about this, how you do that in that particular language. Because every language has the same concepts, but they present it differently. And the last part is the don't repeat yourself later too often, right? So, so stuff like functions. How do you create functions? Your functions are a group of programming code that's grouped together and it can be called together, and the results can be returned and used in a subsequent piece of code. So functions, how to look at classes. Classes is another good way of not repeating yourself, right? So you have one class that has the behavior of a piece of code. You can duplicate it or instantiate, create objects from these classes. So the classes are like the blueprints of how to create an object, right? And this object will contain all the behaviors that you need in that piece of code. And I'll do things like server-side inclusions, right? So require, include. How do you import code from other places? So that's in a nutshell the 5 simple tips of how to learn any programming language. Anyone? You all understand, right? Okay, right? Great. See, I'm speaking to a room of, converts. Anyway, so some specifics here. So on the left, you see PHP code. On the right, you see Ruby code. So, strings. You have a string like this. You have dump quotes. Same thing in Ruby. This is how you do variables with $. And this is variables in Ruby. Basically, you don't have to do anything. Just declare something, write something, right? Name, for example. But to make it appear in a string, this is what we call string interpolation. So variable interpolation into the string, so the name appears inside the string. So that's how we do that in Ruby, and this is how we do that in PHP. So pretty straightforward. Numbers, floats. This is how you represent variables with $sign in front. So anything with $sign in front in PHP represents a variable container. And in Ruby, that's the other way around. Ruby also has a $sign prefix as well. This is more for global variables. So they will be available throughout the entire app. Classes, static variables, constants. More specifics about flow control. For example, in PHP, you have the if statement with some condition. If the condition returns true, returns do something inside this block code. Same thing in Ruby. So Ruby has a very nice syntax for adding anything with a question mark behind it. It's kind of sort of like a Boolean. right? Which means it's true or false. So if true, prints the word hello. Good morning, by the way. So puts hello, oh yeah. So this is different ways of presenting it. And of course, the information can also be stored as, so information can be stored as one layer, or it can be composite, as in a complex composite layer, as in multiple information can be stored together. So like an array, for example. So this is an array of objects, of numbers, array of numbers. We call this an associative array, and associative array in PHP. This is what they call a hash in Ruby. Pretty much the same concept. You have a reference to it, a key reference to it, and then you have the values inside. In iOS or in Objective-C, it's called a dictionary. I think Java, some Java devs here will probably know what that is, right? Hashes. Okay, got it. More specifics. In PHP, this is how you do classes. So this class extends the parent class, right? So there's inheritance involved. So we're learning about all these concepts as well in different programming languages. How do you do OOP? In Ruby, a less than sign basically represents the inheritance as well. Okay. Some more language-specific goodies, right? So what you need to learn to be good at any programming language. First of all, learn about package management. How do you include open source code into your application, right? So that's really cool. Like in PHP, there's Composer, which is a package management tool. In Ruby, there is Gems. You can do that as well. The different tooling available. What kind of text editors can you use? And lastly, how do you get help? Basically, find out. Go to Google, Stack Overflow, look for screencasts on the web. If your internet connection is not very fast, go get some books. Another way is to find a senior. Find a really good senior that can basically teach you and pair program with you, right? That's all I have. Oh yeah, my company is hiring, so yeah. So we're looking for Python. We do Python, we do Ruby, we do Scala right now, Node.js, everything else, right? So we're hiring, so come check us out. That's all I have. Thank you.
So, did you learn any other programming languages besides the ones that you talked about? Like for fun at home?
For fun, I've done some Arduino stuff before, so it was also quite interesting. So that basically, if you go to Hackerspace later, there is this little door access thing. There's infrared, the infrared door access thing. It's done with as an Arduino setup. So I dabbled a little bit of that. Yeah. Similar concept as well. Like, how do you create a variable? How do you pass stuff in? Right? In programming for an Arduino, there's a startup, there's a start, and then there's the loop, and then there's nothing else. So it's different. It's like it has an event loop like JavaScript. So you got to think about, okay, how do I get in and out of the event loop and stuff, or how do I do stuff in the event loop. It's interesting.
Do you use some abstraction like design pattern in your program?
I think design pattern comes a bit later. Once you've started getting familiarizing with the basics, like what I've shared with the 5 basic points. Once you understand the basics, then you have to bring those design concepts in, like design patterns. How do you do MVC pattern, active record pattern, stuff like that, factory pattern, everything else. So I think those are more like helping you write code in a way that is smart. And that's why I talk about reading other people's code. Learning about using a package manager lets you import code from other people who are doing open source stuff, and then you can read their code and get a sense of, oh, this is how you do. So this is how you do this properly, you know, in the open source world kind of thing. So it's kind of cool. Yep. So how many open source contributors here? You're writing your open source libraries, you know, it's out in the world, you know. do something in the world, awesome stuff. Yeah.
Okay,
Right, that's all I have.
so let's thank Michael.
Thank you.
Bye bye.